Recording. Good evening and welcome to the Select Board meeting for the town of Ashburnham for Tuesday, January 18th, 2022. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 6:30, and we'll start out with any citizens' comments or participation from anybody that's on the Zoom call tonight. Go ahead, Claire. Claire, go ahead.
I just wanted to thank you all for having this on Zoom.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Basically what we decided with Brian and the committee was that with what's going on with COVID-19, we're trying to limit the traffic in the public safety building because of the uniqueness of their job down there, as well as make it as comfortable environment for everybody, a safe environment. So we're definitely Zooming tonight, and we'll see where we are over the next few weeks if we continue with this or if we go back to live meetings. But thank you. Anybody else have any comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to the town administrator update. Brian?
Well, thank you. I'll warn you. I have things on my screen that say your bandwidth is low, your network is unstable. So if I get kicked out, bear with me. It'll bring me back in a minute. So, but on that note, so to kind of continue with COVID, on December 28th report, there was 76 cases in town. On January 6th report, there was 117 cases in town. And on the January 13th report, there's 231 cases in town. So we are concerned and still monitoring that situation. There's a little lag on when the numbers get updated to us. But we were hoping that would peak and start going the other way. It has not. So we're still going to monitor that situation and wear masks in town hall and municipal buildings. And we'll monitor that with the Board of Health on whether we continue Zoom or not. So to kind of maintain with the COVID theme, we have looked at test kits. We're still monitoring that with the Board of Health on what they like to do and what's out there. We have talked with Gardner and regionalizing with other communities, and we're still in discussion on that. I know the governor put out some stuff today regarding schools and whatnot on testing and kits. So we're kind of monitoring how things go and then decide which is the best avenue for the town of Ashburnham to move forward with that. That's that part. So that's kind of it for my COVID stuff. The next thing I want to mention is the other week we met with Ashburnham Westminster Regional School District, and during that discussion they updated their capital plan, and the effect on the town of Ashburnham would be an increase of roughly $70,000 from what the original projection was. That is mainly due to the fire alarm system being upgraded. That's a $100,000 upgrade, and that's the bulk of that. That's the Oakmont. So the bulk of that would be split between the two communities. And they moved the bathroom partition replacement up further, but at a lower price. So those are two things that seem to cover that additional $70,000. And that'll be going in front of Capital, Select Board, and town meeting and everything else before we fund it. The school is more than willing to come to the meetings and discuss their capital plan with us at those meetings. We've hired a new police officer. That officer will start either January 31st or the week after. Larry will bring that person and the other new hire into a future meeting to recognize them there. So one other thing I'd be looking for a vote on. So there's a efficiency and regionalization study that Gardner, Westminster, and a couple other communities with Ashburnham are trying to do for their veterans agent. We regionalized with Westminster in the past. However, Westminster no longer was covering that service. So Gardner is willing to take it on, and they brought in some other communities. So Gardner's going to apply for the grant, but I think I'd be looking for a vote from the select board allowing them to apply for the grant with Ashburnham and the other communities.
So actually, Rosemary, let me ask you a question, because I know coming up, you've got some information on a efficiency and regionalization grant. Would that prevent us from applying for this, or can you make more than one application, either Brian or Rosemary?
I don't know. Brian and I talked about it earlier today, and we were going to check in to see whether or not we could submit a single applicant application having to do with efficiency. So it's a different component of the grant. I don't know. You know, I haven't been able to find out. Did you see anything in there, Brian, whether or not you could do more than one?
I had at the time, I got pulled away with the MBTA community stuff this afternoon. I hadn't looked back at that. But I think the one with God and whatnot, I think we should join in with, and hopefully if we can do more, we can do more.
So if we get that, does that reduce our exposure as far as what the cost would be, or is this in addition to?
It would reduce our exposure. Basically, what they need to do is, because they need to add another person, another body, actually another body and a half to do this. They need more computers and more of that stuff. We were using this to offset that one-time expense to get those people into the system. Therefore, the communities wouldn't have to pay for that upgrade.
Oh, here we go. It says here, may an eligible entity apply for more than one grant? One individual and may participate in one multi-jurisdictional application.
So we could do both.
do it.
Okay. All right, then, seeing Leo's not here, I will offer up a motion authorizing the town administrator to apply with Gardner and other regional communities for an efficiency and regionalization grant for veteran services.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, aye? Aye.
Aye.
No opposition, no abstentions. So there you go, Brian.
Excellent. Thank you. Rosemary, thank you for finding that so quickly. I appreciate that.
We just got to do a roll call vote back to that.
Oh, that's right.
Sure. So Bill Johnson, yes.
Rosemary Meissner, yes.
Thank you.
So one other thing that came up recently is we talked with Ty and Bond actually today with the DPW superintendent regarding the dams and the safety of those. We had a decree to get those inspected, but due to the months and whatnot, we asked for an extension. They granted the extension till the end of spring. So we'll be moving those forward towards the end of spring in order to get that work done. And they'll be inspecting 3 of the dams. So the two things. So there's the final guidance came out on the recovery funds, the $900,000 that we've already received. They've changed the main guidance that affects us is how the calculation for lost revenue was. Before there was a lost revenue calculation, they removed that calculation and allow you just to take up to $10 million. But again, we don't have $10 million to take, but you can absorb the 900,000. So I'm just bringing that up because that's an update. But I'm sure that we'll have future talks and discussions on how to allocate those funds. We've allocated some of it already towards the downtown initiative and for the $7,500 for the COVID testing kits. But other than that, we haven't voted to or approved moving any of the additional funds anywhere else. But I'll be back with requests in order to move those funds down the road.
Brian, can I ask you a question on that?
Sure.
So how far down the road do you think we want to have a conversation about this? And before you answer that, my thought is that I know you're obviously going to be giving us some recommendations. I think personally, it would be worthwhile that we gave the public an opportunity to give us some suggestions. So I wouldn't want to do it as the form of a public hearing, but I'd certainly want to put it on the agenda or put some time out there where people would have a period of time that they could comment. and provide suggestions about, you know, what they may want us to do with that money. What do you think?
Now, I think it's supposed to be treated just like a grant. So, you know, how we do the grants and, you know, I ask for permission and, you know, we can discuss it and, you know, it's your call whether you want to have outside input on that discussion. But, you know, it would be an open discussion between ourselves at an open meeting in order to allocate those funds. I'm not against any suggestions. You know, obviously I see what's going on financially. And, you know, I recommend based on those lines, sometimes you guys see things that aren't just strictly financial. So I'm, you know, if that's what you'd like to do, I follow suit with that.
Rosemary, what do you think?
I have mixed feelings. I agree with Brian. I mean, there's things that we have that we have to look at with this one-time pot of money that we might never see again. And do we have a lot of wiggle room to think about where all else we're going to spend it? You know, it's not like an open checkbook, so to speak. I don't see it as that. We have other needs, right? So I'd like to look at what Brian and any other department heads might say are like critical needs that we could spend this money for. And we've talked about some of it already. And it's important. You know, the water and sewer piece is extremely important to our community. And we're required to provide that services now that we've got so many people that are dependent upon them, right? So I don't know how much we're going to have at the end of the day to really talk about. Wouldn't you agree, Brian?
Correct. I mean, I could absorb that money rather quickly. However, you know, because they did open it up, I think, you know, before I was looking at it because of what I was given in front of me, those rules have now changed. I'm willing to take a second look at it. I mean, this just came out last week, so it's pretty new to how it's being laid out.
Yeah, I'd just like to take the time to get, you know, your opinion and the other department heads' opinions as well, to see where we are with it. You know, it's nice to, I mean, I see a lot of the grants that we're going to talk about later tonight as being and I call them, I mean, forgive me if I say this, more of the warm and fuzzy things, but then there's stuff that we have no choice. We have to address, right? And those are typically the high ticket items, right?
Yes. Yes.
All right, so how far down the road do we want to push this until we start talking about it, Brian?
Sure. So I'm looking at the end of February. You know, I'm going to get the FY23 budget settled before I move on spending those funds. Obviously, as I go through that process, I'll be looking for shortfalls and whatnot as I go through the budget process to see if there's things that we could allocate these funds for and maybe offset the budget and help us out. So I'd be wait till I at least get the budget completed before I start looking into that.
All right, so okay, we'll pick that up somewhere down the road, maybe in March.
Okay.
All right. Anything else for us?
That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Rosemary, any questions?
Not on anything Brian had to say, no.
Okay, very good. Next up, we have appointments to the Celebrate Ashburnham Street Fair Committee. And I did get 2 additional applications that got sent over to me, and I was going to forward them to you, and now I can't find them. They're somewhere in a pile on my desk. So I know I have them, but I'm going to put them out there so we can get this thing moving. So we have 4 people that have expressed an interest in wanting to serve on the committee. They are Steve Coswell, Patty Johnson, Barbara DeVito, and Karen Mattis. So like I said, all of them have completed the volunteer form and with their expression of interest in doing that. So is anybody interested in offering a motion, or would you like me to do it?
I don't ever do motions, Bill.
Okay, that's right. You don't do motions. I'm sorry. All right, so then I would move that the select board appoint Steve Coswell, Patty Johnson, Karen Mattis, and Barbara DeVito to the Celebrate Ashburnham Committee.
I'll second that. with discussion.
Moved in discussion. Discussion, Rosemarie, go ahead.
I do not know the last woman, Ms. Mattis.
Karen Mattis, yes. So go ahead.
No, and I have not, forgive me, but I have not been able to get into OneDrive today. And I did not get around to finding out, contacting Mary to find out why I can't get into it. Did we get the applications or
Yes.
are they in OneDrive or?
No, that's what I was saying. The applications for Steve and Patty, yes, I believe, I don't know if they're in OneDrive, but I know they were submitted to Mary. The other two were given to me and I have them here in my home office. So I'll be finding them tonight or tomorrow and scanning them in and sending them over. So, but I know all these people, and if I can certainly give you some background if you'd like on any of the people that are on there.
Actually, I'm getting into OneDrive right now. Mary, did you hear me? I don't know. But anyway, I mean, I'd like to see the applications, letter of interest for those that have applied.
So you're saying we're not going to vote on this tonight?
I asked for, the reason we didn't do it the last time is because I wanted to see them.
Okay, so let me ask you this question. The fact that they all completed the volunteer application form, isn't that in and of itself a statement that they're interested in doing it? I mean, it almost seems redundant that we ask them to send us a note that they're interested, yet they're filling out the form for the committee.
It's required in our appointed committee handbook, and all volunteers are required to do that.
I know, but isn't the application in expression of interest?
That you need to submit a resume or a letter of interest with it.
Okay.
So like I said, I don't know if it's in there. No, I haven't received any of it. That's, hey, I mean, if you're going to hold, you have to hold everybody to the same process, right? You can't just rubber stamp people. And there may be, I know that they filled out the application, but in the past, a lot of people have filled out the application, then failed to go attend any of the meetings. I don't know why they bothered to apply, or they don't contribute. And I'm not saying, I know Patty, okay, and I certainly know Steve Coswell. So I have no doubt in my mind, but the problem is, Bill, is that it's a requirement. It's on the application. I hate to be a stickler about it, but it is.
I just don't see where the application itself, if you weren't interested, you wouldn't apply. And the
I want
fact
to know
that
why they're interested. They have to tell me why. Why are they interested? That's the letter of interest. Why are they interested in being in it, on it? Just to sit in a meeting and not do anything? Or do they have something that they want to accomplish? Or do they agree?
well, so all four of these people served on the 250th committee for over
I get it. I know. I understand.
over 5 years.
Hey, I'm not
So-
saying I'm not going to, support these people, but the thing is that if we make an exception for this group of people, then why aren't we making an exception for somebody else who just didn't bother to submit a letter of interest or a resume with their application?
Well, last time I checked, we're not getting any applications for anything.
I
As
know.
we're going to hear again later, that nobody is volunteering for anything. And so here we have 4 people that are stepping up who have experience doing this. And another couple of weeks is going to go by while we wait for a piece of paper that says, yeah, gee, I'm interested in doing this. I mean, we started talking about this thing back in December.
Yeah, but
and
the
we keep-
last meeting, Bill, I asked, the reason we passed over Steve and Patty is because they did not have a letter of interest and or a resume.
All right, so then, well, I'll just tell them to never mind then. because I'm not going to go back to them and say, geez, you got to send us an email and let us know you're interested. Again, I wasn't here when the booklet of information was put together, but I just, it's okay. All right, I'll withdraw my motion and we'll move on to the next thing. Okay, next up is going to be the community one-stop expression of interest. Rosemary.
Yes, so the community one-stop expression of interest is a new way for applying for a variety of different grants. And you can submit up to 5 possible projects through the expression of interest. So it's not the actual application. What it is filling out this form, and it goes in front of the powers that be. They look at them and they get back to you and they basically say, this is how you're going to apply. This might not be the appropriate grant opportunity for you. So you need to redirect your application to another agency, another grant. So we can apply for 5 possible projects on the expression of interest. If we submit 5 projects on or before February 4th, so that's very soon. If we wait and we do not submit, then we can only apply for 2 projects through the expression of interest. So I sent out my suggestions for potential projects, talked them over with Brian. And the first 2 that we should apply for, the 2 that came out of the RRP project, that's what we came to consensus on. So those were the projects that Economic Development and the Select Board identified as our priority projects. So it was the storefront improvement program and the creation of the new park on River Street, specifically the pop-up installation program. So under the storefront improvement program, it was the #1 Economic Development and Board of Selectmen priority project. The suggestion of the RRP consultants was to apply for the Mass Downtown Initiative grant. So this would pay for the technical assistance services for to set up the whole program. It would be identifying additional funding sources, engaging with the businesses and the property owners, developing the design guidelines, developing the criteria for application, approval, installation, and maintenance, developing funding and oversight, and engaging and working with town employees who are tasked with the project responsibility. So the maximum grant award under the Mass Downtown Initiative for this would be $25,000. I don't know whether or not $25,000 would be enough for this technical assistance, but it's something that I think we should put in our expression of interest to find out whether or not it is something that we could tackle through that grant opportunity. So that's the first one. The second priority project is the River Street Park, again recommended by the RRP consultants. The project will include the design and implementation of a park at the town-owned lot on River Street. So the phase 1, planning and project development, Open Space and Recreation Committee and the Rapid Recovery Program people have outlined their goals in both the Open Space and Recreation Committee PowerPoint and the RRP report. The Select Board has engaged with the Conway School to potentially provide landscape design services in the spring of 2022 and have voted to allocate $11,000 for these services. We don't know whether or not we'll be selected by this Conway School, but they've submitted it to the faculty and the faculty is interested in presenting it to their students as possible project. If our project is selected by the Conway School, the next phase of the project would be community engagement in the design process. But while we're doing this, while all this is going on, the RRP consultants are also talking about working towards a temporary pop-up installation at the park. So in looking at what that would entail and the suggestions of the RRP funding consultants, the suggestion was to apply for a Mass Development Commonwealth Places grant. So there's two possible ones. One would be a seed grant that would fund the community engagement, visiting, and capacity building to support the pop-up installation. That grant opportunity would give us $250 to $7,500. The implementation grant would be up to $10,000 per project, unmatched. So it's an unmatched grant. We must demonstrate a direct relationship to local economic development. There's a strong preference given to projects within the downtown area. The funding pays for startup costs, technical assistance, and in this case, it would be the pop-up business guidelines and requirements, recruitment, and marketing. Now, this particular grant, the seed grant and the implementation grant, are awarded on a rolling basis between January and June. I don't know whether or not Mass Development would think that this would be a project that they would support with a seed or an implementation grant, but I think we should, at the very least, reach out to Mass Development and find out the appropriateness of the grant. The next part of that pop-up installation, which is not on the Community One stop, is potentially applying for the Shared Streets and Spaces grant. So that would be applications due on March 1st. It would be supporting a Main Street project in repurposing a town-owned piece of property, creating a safe space for people to walk, bike, retail activity, dining, community programming, which is the long-term goal of the River Street Park. Now, again, I don't know whether or not Shared Streets and Spaces would support this project. It would be for equipment. So the equipment would be the sheds. I don't know if sheds would be considered an eligible piece of equipment. So we would need to contact the people at Shared Streets and Spaces to find out if that would be the case. The RRP consultants have talked about looking at sponsorships for the pop-up sheds, but I have no idea, what they'd be willing to contribute or how much the sheds would cost. So these are all things that we need to be looking at very quickly in order to decide whether or not this is something that goes on the expression of interest. But those are the two ways that we could support the pop-up piece. Other than that, as far as the River Street Park is concerned, we can't do anything until we get a design. So if we're selected by the Conway School, then the design would be in hand in June, I believe it is, Brian. Is that what they said? We would end up with the design, and then we would know what we'd be applying for. So that's all I could come up with in order to possibly fund the next phase of the River Street Park, and that would be the temporary installation of those sheds. The third initiative was an initiative that was suggested by Mass Development, and that would be a downtown improvement master plan. So this again would be an application to the Mass Downtown Initiative. It would be up to $75,000 for a master plan. It would include the evaluation, existing conditions, zoning, land use, sidewalks, crosswalks, parking, streetscape improvements, trees, plantings, amenities, furnishings, connectivity, wayfinding, lighting, signage, utilities, and programming for downtown. So again, this was recommended by Mass Development as our next step for moving downtown forward. The fourth possible project would be an infrastructure project funded through a STRAP grant for Mass Work. That's part of Mass Works. So STRAP grants are for communities that are less than 7,000 people. We've applied before, Ashburnham has, and we received it. So it was for Ringe Turnpike. We received $500,000 in 2010 for 2.5 miles of Ringe Turnpike. It is a reimbursement grant. I don't know if a match is required or not. I have not determined that yet. The good news about the STRAP grant is it's not like a complete streets grant where you're restricted to only applying for complete streets every so many years. You can apply every year for a STRAP grant. So if we don't get it this year, we could apply next year. But the recommendation, since the maximum grant is $1 million, and I'm not saying we're spending $1 million, perhaps we consider completing the rest of Main Street from Pleasant and Lawrence to Maple and River. It might be the most efficient way of moving forward on that, rather than how many years do we have to wait? Like 2 more years to apply for complete streets? And we're capped at $400,000 for that. And we already know that that section of Main Street exceeds $400,000. So that's a possible project number 4. Number 5 would be applying for a rural and small town grant, town planning grant, which again is an infrastructure grant. So it is a reimbursement grant. The grant would be, if we were to get it, we would have to provide a 10% funding match at least. We'd get bonus points if we contributed more. The grants awarded in the fall of 2022, work would be completed by June 30th of 2024. So it's pretty far out. So here's the weird thing about this grant that I've been able to find so far. The maximum amount of the grant is $400,000, but they usually cap it at $75,000. Unless the town can prove otherwise, that they need it. So usually what happens is towns apply for this grant, combine it with other funding in order to get a project across the finish line. In fiscal 23, they've already come out and said that they're only going to fund up to $3 million for all of the grants. So that makes me think that the lesser amount probably will be what is awarded. Now, my suggestion would be looking at Memorial Drive. And the reason I brought it up is in looking at the Complete Streets prioritization plan, that was the least expensive piece that's on the Complete Streets prioritization plan. They estimated in 2019 that it was going to be $75,000. No, wait a minute, $80,000, excuse me. So that would be sidewalks and improvement to the road, to the roadway on Memorial Drive. So it would be library, to Chapel and Main Street to Winchester Park. So that's what I've got. I mean, supporting Memorial Drive, this project, which might get us some more bonus points, is if we are selected by the Conway School, we're demonstrating that we're doing work on Winchester Park through the design, the park redesign. So we're looking to demonstrate our commitment to connecting programming and the park to Main Street businesses, as was recommended in the Rapid Recovery Program consultants. So those are the 5 initiatives. Like I said, if we're going to submit all 5, we have to do so by February 4th. There's additional information, obviously, we need for every one of these projects. So if we're going to move forward with them, we need to hustle.
So the only one that I'm troubled about is the Shared Streets and Spaces grant. Having read through that thing a couple of times, I don't think that that's going to qualify for their funding based on what they're looking to do. So if I had a preference, I would say let's pull that one out and apply for the other 4 and not 5.
Well, no, what I would do, I disagree with you again tonight, Bill. I would move forward with the Commonwealth Places grant. I would call Shared Streets and Places and ask them point blank and determine whether or not they would consider that a possibility or not. Municipalities are eligible to receive 2 equipment-only grants in addition to an award for another project type within the same grant round. So that's the fine print. So I'm wondering whether or not they would contribute something to those sheds. I don't know how much a shed costs.
I do. I looked at them today.
You did.
Yep.
So 10 by 12, what would it be? That's the most common pop-up shed.
Depending on what you put on it, the type of siding and shingles and things like that, you're looking at anywhere from $6,800 to $11,000 a piece.
So just
That's again, there may be, that's Reed's Ferry. There may be other companies out there that could do it for less money, but that's kind of a ballpark figure of, and they would build it, deliver it, and set it in place.
so let's say that's 6,000 per shed. I don't know. I don't know what the sponsorships would be. Because the suggestion from the RRP consultants was to obtain sponsorships from banks, chambers, other organizations to help defray the cost. So it wouldn't be the cost for all the sheds. It would be for, I don't know, 1, 2, 3 of them. I don't know. It depends on how many sheds we're putting there. So, you know, that's the one piece. So we can apply for the equipment stuff in addition to the infrastructure piece, which Shared Streets and Spaces for this round is looking at infrastructure. Is that what you're thinking, Bill?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
Yes, and I don't know that I'm interested in putting all our eggs in that one basket with the pop-up shops down on Riverfront Park there. So I'm thinking to myself, would we be better served to, you know, do a separate Shared Streets application for something else that we talked about with sidewalks downtown or something like that? Would we stand a better chance of getting funding for that versus the other one?
So you're not interested in applying for an equipment only and another project type in the same grant round?
Well, see, I don't, sheds are not, at least in my estimation, are not going to qualify as equipment.
Well, we haven't determined that yet. It's worth a phone call, Bill. That's all I'm saying. I mean, they could shut us down right away. But I think it's worth a phone call. Even if they were to pay for one shed, we got one shed. I think it's worth a phone call. Any of these, honestly, Bill, I don't know whether or not Mass Development's Commonwealth Places would be interested in funding the technical assistance we need. I mean, there's a lot that has to happen with that poppet shed stuff. I mean, we need to develop an application and criteria for selecting people. We need marketing. We need to look at the liability issues. These, folks have to have insurance. What's going to be the rent? How are we going to deal with the need for electricity? We have to get through Concom on this. So there's a lot of questions on it. And don't forget what the expression of interest piece, they could just knock, you can apply for 5, but they might come back and say, hey, you only have 2 out of 5 good ideas. And it might not be the 2 we want. So anyway, that's, hey, I hear what you're saying, and I've struggled with that too, because one of the other things that RRP is suggesting is that we looked at shared streets and spaces to do the mobility piece for Main Street from Lawrence to Central. But that's the STRAP grant.
All right, so
And the STRAP.
I don't want to beat a dead horse here. So I'll make a motion that we vote to do the community one-stop shop expression of interest for the 5 projects outlined in Rosemary's presentation tonight.
Well, I'll second that, but I would like Brian to weigh in. What do you think, Brian?
As I mentioned, I'm good with the first 2, I mean, the storefront for sure. The pop-ups, I get, and obviously any sidewalk improvements we need to complete, the sidewalks down Main Street, those are the ones that I think are the front runners with me. So.
Right. What do you think about, well, we have to come up with 5. Do you have any other thoughts for the 5? I mean, is Memorial Drive worth going after? The document I sent out, I have other things that popped out on the prioritization plan if you want to tackle infrastructure. There aren't very many that are under that 75K. Memorial Drive to Lawrence Street, Chapel Street, so that'd be the sidewalks, was 85K in 2019. But that doesn't get us all of Chapel.
Right. I mean, I just look at the new sidewalks on both sides of the road, and I'd love to see those continue, down to the bridge, tell you the truth, if you had my opinion, I think.
Yeah, that's River Street. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, I focus all my area, at least in this part of town, to that section.
So how the expression of interest is that you send it out, they come back with feedback. Then you have to apply. So we can submit these 5 and then decide to only submit 3 in the end.
Okay.
The only outlier, as to Bill's point, is shared streets and spaces is not on the community one-stop. So, if we don't apply for that, right, with the shed, but then we get the Mass Development Commonwealth Places grant to start the process of the pop-up shed, are we going to have other additional town funds to actually help defray the cost of the infrastructure, the pop-up infrastructure, the sheds, electrical, that sort of thing? Can we come up with that, Brian? Maybe through ARPA? Anyway, it's warm and fuzzy and I already
Well,
said.
as I say,
warm and fuzzy.
until I collect motor vehicle excise.
I know,
in the months
I
of, you know, April and May, I'm not gonna commit to any funding outside of anything.
Right. See, the thing with the pop-up sheds is that of all these projects, you're on a shorter timeline.
Mhm.
So the deal would be, if you look at the timeline, is that we're going to have to do a community cleanup, as we were going to do anyway on the River Street Park area, in the spring, early on. And then we got to get all that technical assistance done. And then we have to install those sheds and think about it for July, August, September, you know, let's go 10, 12 weeks and see how it works. So we don't have as much time. A lot of these other applications, like I said, aren't due until June, and the work doesn't start until 2023. So, you know, that's the one that's the fastest moving. If we don't think we can move forward with it financially, then, you know, maybe you said it was the number, you know, 1 and 2 were the top projects, but what happens if we can't follow through?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, how much money are we talking? I mean, that's really the
I don't
deal.
know.
If I'm talking 10,000, that's one thing, 50,000 another, 100,000 another, you know, so.
Well, it depends. Like I said, it depends on the shed. So, you know, if we're talking $5,000-$6,000 sheds, and that's before sponsorships.
Right.
So I just don't know. I mean, hey, I can put it on the expression of interest. Let's call Shared Streets and Spaces and ask whether or not it's even a consideration. We don't have to get this in until February 4th, and maybe we rethink it in real time.
Okay.
Well, but there's not going to be another selectmen's meeting before that date, so.
Well, then we rejigger the motion.
Change it now or change it?
We change the motion now. We change the motion pending, you know, additional information that is required in order to submit the expression of interest. See, right now, when you look at the expression of interest, I don't need to know exactly how much it costs. When it says how much funding do you need, every one of it says less than 100K, 100 to 500, 500 to 1 million, or over 1 million. So I think the pop-up sheds qualify for less than 100,000. So I don't need hard costs. But if we financially can't think about supplementing the pop-up shed through additional funding, through, you know, the ARPA funding, which you can use it for business recovery and economic development, then, you know, then we just we don't move forward with it. We submit the expression of interest and we don't, you know, eliminate that piece.
Well, with the motion we have right now, we're saying to go ahead and submit the 5 things. So at the end of the day, if only 4 of them become viable based on the information that you find out, then we just do 4 of them.
Right. I just would move forward with another project if we just getting the technical assistance for the pop-up sheds. If we can't do them this year, it's like, why then? Why include it? See what I'm
Well,
saying?
it'd give you a better understanding of, you know, from a cost perspective, you know, getting the application process, the insurance, the power, you know, the Concom, all that stuff. It would give you more time to get that stuff in play.
But I might find out when I call Mass Development that they'll say that they wouldn't fund it. See what I'm saying? The implementation seed might not be appropriate.
Okay, so then let me try this another way. I'm going to rescind my motion.
Okay.
Are you willing to rescind your second?
Yes.
Okay, make a motion.
I make a motion to submit the expression of interest as discussed tonight and proposed by myself, subject to additional information required by in order to complete the expression of interest, in order to determine the
Liability?
eligibility to for that specific grant. It's really
Mary,
just a pop-up.
Mary, do you have all that?
I'm getting there, yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we can rework.
I will second that motion.
Thank you.
Is there any additional discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? No, we can't do that, sorry.
Roll call.
Roll call vote. Bill Johnson, yes.
Rosemary Meisner, yes.
Okay, excellent. We got there.
I know it was hard, and I'm sorry, I don't do motions.
All right, so next up I had shared streets, but
We can talk about it, Bill, because, you know, this might blow out of the water right away.
yeah, no, I know, but we have until March 1st to make the application for shared streets and spaces. So I think I'd like to look at I mean, like Brian said, my first preference would be try to continue the sidewalk rehabilitation, working our way down Main Street. But that'll be the third time that we will have applied for that. So I don't know if third time's a charm or not, but I think I'd like to invest a little bit more time in looking and see what the possibilities would be. And we
Yeah,
can bring,
The thing with the STRAP grant, if we apply with that, it would fund the whole thing. And one of my questions is whether or not, because that application isn't due for a while, could we get an engineering firm to prepare the application for us?
yeah, no, that's a possibility. I mean, obviously we were more successful with the smaller amount of money on the shared street. And I think if we're going to get into the big numbers, we probably have to have a better prepared presentation with engineering and stuff like that to potentially sell that better. So let's bring that back in the next meeting and we'll talk about that some more. Okay, next up is going to be, do we need to do the efficiency and regionalization grant, or did I miss that?
It's not on the agenda. We could do it in other business or we could do it now. It's up to you.
Let's do it now.
Okay, so that one there, you know, we've had conversations about getting our RRP consultants have talked about increasing what they call our administrative capacity in town hall. That was one of their recommendations. And in conversation with the funding consultants, they've tossed out, you know, a number of possible ways to expand town hall capacity. We've had the discussion about a planner, and that's a real need for us. But also it's brought up that we would need someone in order to move the economic development piece forward who has a background in community development. And then of course we need to hire a new conservation agent. So we've got that whole conversation coming along. Mass Development, who we've been working with, has recommended that we hire a town planner. So the two pieces that the Mass Development has suggested is the downtown master plan and the town planner. But also we've had conversation about improving the efficiency of town hall and having consultants who would take a look-see at where our deficiencies are, where we need to expand, how we might expand people's job descriptions, whether or not we could hire consultants to do certain aspects of the services that we need. So when I was looking at the efficiency and regionalization grant, they do have a one-time fund to assist in efficiency initiatives that support long-term municipal sustainability. So it's internal efficiencies for a town to plan and implement innovative strategies that improve the quality and efficiency of municipal service delivery. So this grant, if we were to apply for it, would be technical assistance. That would mean consulting services in order to assist with the project. The project would not exceed more than 1 year. And it would, I think the max on it is 100K. Now, I'm going to tell you straight up, they don't award a lot of these efficiency projects out every year. It's usually only, less than a half a dozen. I don't know what the odds would be if we applied to it that we'd get it, but I'm assuming Brian knows Sean Cronin.
A little bit, yeah.
So it says for more information, we contact him. I don't know whether or not this would be something we would even have a chance of getting, but it might be worth reaching out to him. Who knows? I mean, we have hired HR consultants in the past. So my belief is that it was in order to do job classification, job descriptions, and maybe the whole step and grade thing for town hall. So this was a long time ago, like maybe 10, 15 years ago. I did find that Ashburnham contracted with a company called Human Resources Consulting. I don't know the exact date, but I believe that that's what the project was. So hiring a human resource consultant, they could update personnel policies and procedures. They could review and update job descriptions as necessary. They could look at staffing and utilization. So, I don't know what our needs are, but we don't have an HR department in town. And consulting services might be something that could help us. So this is more for Brian than it is for, you need to tell me, Brian, tell us if this is something you would make a run at.
Yeah, definitely willing to look at it, to see what services are out there. I'm gonna, look at Human Resource Consulting Company and take a look at what came back when they did it in 2010, and see if there's still firms, that are reasonable out there. And I don't mind touching base with Sean Cronin. I've done a few Zooms here and there. I knew his predecessor more than I know him, but that's fine.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I found it and I just said, hey, this could be helpful to you.
Sure. Thank you.
So then at this point in time, we really don't need to take any action on that, or do we? Closes February 10th.
Correct.
So we'll have a meeting on the 7th, I think.
Okay.
Is that enough time to pull that together, Brian, if we decide to do it on the 7th?
Yeah, I'd have to get it for that deadline anyway. So let's plan on that anyways.
All right, why don't you take a look at that and then you can report back to us on the 7th.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Next up is the MBTA communities multifamily zoning requirement. So I sent out some information to everybody, and I'm not going to go through all of it today, but I wanted to at least go through, I put together a couple pages of highlighted information so that we can make the public aware of what's going on as well. So let me go ahead and go over that. So this is the multifamily zoning requirement for MBTA communities. This was enacted as part of the Economic Development Bill in January of 2021. The new section 3A of MGL Chapter 40A, the Zoning Act, requires that an MBTA community shall have at least one zoning district of reasonable size in which multifamily housing is permitted as of right and meets other criteria set forth in the statute. The minimum gross density of 15 acres per unit, not more than 1/2 miles from a commuter rail station, subway station, ferry terminal, or bus station if applicable. No age restrictions on the housing, and the housing is suitable for families with children. So every community that's considered an MBTA community was assigned a community type, and there are 4 categories. There is subway or light rail, bus, commuter rail, or MBTA adjacent community. Ashburnham is an MBTA adjacent community. And based on the 2020 housing unit census, we had 2,730 housing units in Ashburnham. And based on this new requirement, the minimum unit requirement would be an additional 750 housing units for the town of Ashburnham. And there's an asterisk that goes along with that. So it says the MBTA communities with unit capacity lower than 750 units are noted as having a capacity of 750 units. This is the fewest number of multifamily units needed to meet the gross density requirement of 15 units per acre. So what they're asking towns like Ashburnham to do is designate a section of town that is a minimum of 50 acres of property that you could potentially build multi-family housing by right. When you think about that, 750 units, that's a big number for any community, particularly a small community. And as you read through some of the frequently asked questions, it's saying that it's not a housing production plan. You don't have to build them. You do have to make provisions, though, in your zoning to allow it to happen. So, we have restrictions in Ashburnham about the number of units you can build per year. That would have to comply with that. But this is the first step in a process of Ashburnham complying with the requirements of the new legislation. So essentially, there's 2 things that you have to do. To remain in compliance, you have to go about collecting public comment on the draft guidelines, and specifically an MBTA community must submit the MBTA community information form by 5 p.m. on May 2nd, 2020, and hold a briefing of your city council, town council, or select board on the draft compliance guidance no later than May 2nd, 2022, and attest to that on the MBTA community information form. So the fact that we're talking about it tonight will qualify us for the second must-do requirement in this, and that we're discussing it. And we're still going to have a whole bunch of conversations between planning board, the select board, to figure out exactly what we're going to do with this. So I will get some information, or I'll talk to Mary and Brian, that we'll have to put some information up on our website that people can go to. It's currently on the in the mass.gov site, but we make it more easy for them to find it, and it walks through this frequently asked questions. There's a lot of information in there. But this will pose, I think, a significant challenge for us determining where it's going to be. For example, the first thing that would come to mind would be maybe the current DPW site, because we have 4.5 acres down there and it is downtown and they're wanting to do that. But you're not allowed to do age restrictions. So if we were contemplating putting age restricted housing downtown, like 55 and older, if we designate that as this particular area, it would preclude us from setting any of those age restrictions that we might want to have. So we're going to have some conversations, like I said, with some boards and talk about what the best opportunity is to cite this in Ashburnham. So like I said, it'll be interesting. So an MBTA community that does not comply with Section 3A, which is what we're talking about, will not be eligible for funding from the Housing Choice Initiative, the Local Capital Projects Fund, or Mass Works infrastructure programs. So they are putting some restrictions on this. If you don't apply, then you're not going to have access to apply for these grant programs. So they're also providing some technical assistance through the Massachusetts Housing Partnership, MHP. And through them, we can get online tools in a clearinghouse of information available to municipalities at their own pace, such as webinars and training modules, best practices, model ordinances and bylaws, and sample public outreach materials. They also provide grant monies for third-party assistance to municipalities selected based on their readiness to participate and need for support, including help with drafting / amending bylaws and ordinances, conducting build-out analysis, and drawing / mapping district boundaries. So we may have to take a look at all those things. There may be some other grant opportunities through DLTA grants that we may be able to apply for to help us pull this thing together. So having said that, I'll throw that out there to Rosemary or Brian for any comments, questions, statements, thoughts, concerns.
Well, I haven't obviously studied this as much as you have, Bill or Brian, but it's my understanding that the guidelines are draft guidelines.
Correct.
And they're soliciting public comment. Now, I don't know how far public comment goes, but if enough small communities like, I'm looking at this map right now, Ashby is one of the towns that is an MBTA community. I mean, there's some little towns here and, it's a heavy lift. I mean, 750 units. Since it's a draft guideline, is there still a possibility that those numbers will be knocked down for smaller communities? I mean, this is a huge burden for communities like ours.
I don't know. I don't think the legislation is going to change. Like I said, the draft guidelines are out there, but I think the guidelines are more about how you're going to put this thing together, not whether or not they're going to change the legislation. And it's already been voted on. And
well, I'm wondering whether or not through talking to our elected officials and enough people just say, hey, wait a minute, we can't do it, that there'll be some sort of like, we don't have to comply for X number of years. See what I'm saying? So it's like, okay, we're going to have to hit that 750 at some point in time, but maybe it's 25 years for a community like ours, or after we hit a population of X. But, there's, for us to be able to support, depending on where this is, think about this, 750 units, we don't even have the capacity from a water and sewer standpoint. Forget about schools, right? So, and that's just another consideration. Public services, everything. Plus,
Well,
we have a
so-
bylaw that limits the amount of housing that we can have each year. So all I'm saying is, it's worth, we have to make it a priority that we submit comments. We typically don't do that in this town. We're like radio silence, but we have to talk to our elected officials, John Zlotnick, Ann Goby. We need to submit these public comments, and we need to stress that this is a huge burden for us to comply with this. Hey, maybe it doesn't go anywhere, but hey, it's worth the try, right? I don't know.
Well, I'm not sure if the comment period is closed on this or not.
It's
I'm
the end
not,
of March.
okay, so it hasn't.
Yeah.
So based on the current bylaw that we have, just to do 750 multifamily units would take us 21.42 years to
Yeah.
comply based on what the current regulation is. So I don't disagree with you. I think we need to speak up and ask how we're going to pull this thing off.
Well, look at this though. Here's the deal, right? They're saying right here, if we don't comply, right, we're not going to be eligible for the funding for Housing Choice Initiative Local Capital Projects Fund or Mass Works. That's the STRAP grant. The STRAP grant is part of Mass Works. So, hey, we're going to comply. We're going to submit our information form by May 2nd. But yeah, I don't know. I just think that we need to really be on top of this thing. And we have to speak out loudly.
Brian, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. We need to make a comment that, this shouldn't apply to communities, we'll say less than, 5,000 or 10,000 people, because it's not reasonable. And in here it says it has to, should be reasonable to your place. Yet when they give the categories, adjacent community is only 10%, where a rapid transit who's right on is 25%. Yet we have to still meet the 750 number. That's not reasonable. Why even change that to 10%? Because it has no bearing on us. So I think my concern really is, if 750 units at 4 people per household average, that's 3,000 people to our population, putting a burden, water, sewer, school, police, fire, all the other things, the overall cost to the community would be astronomical. So difficult.
And at the end of the day, we don't even have a bus that comes through town.
Exactly. And a significant amount of our property is our parcels are restricted. So where would we put a lot of these people anyway?
I
What
glanced
is
at
it? 40% of DCR owns a ton of our land. We just got our valuations today. They came rolling through. We have conservation restrictions on a lot of our open space. That's a defined town value. It changes the character of Ashburnham completely.
I don't disagree. So we'll have to revisit this and come up with a strategy of reaching out to our elected officials and let them know that we're not happy about this, and see what happens. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Next up is approval of minutes. So I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of January 3rd, 2021.
I'll second that.
Roll call vote. Bill Johnson, yes.
Rosemary Meissner, yes.
And I'll also make a motion to approve the working session minutes of January 6th, 2022.
I would like to pass over that.
Okay. Then I will withdraw my motion and we'll bring that back up next time around. Okay, next up, other business. Rosemary, do you have anything under other business?
don't think so.
Brian, do you have anything?
I do not. Thank you.
All right, I have two things. The first one is received information from the town clerk regarding the annual town caucus that we need to publicize tonight and take a vote on and get in to see Mary and sign off on this thing. So from the town clerk, Michelle Johnson, the annual town caucus for the purpose of nomination of candidates for the town offices under provisions of section 117 and 121 inclusive, chapter 53 of the general laws, will be held on Monday, February 28th, 2022 at 7 p.m. at Stevens Memorial Library, 20 Memorial Drive, the Malcolm Stewart Room. Offices to be filled with terms are listed below. Moderator, 1 position for a 1-year term. Board of Selectmen, 1 position for a 3-year term. Board of Health, 2 open positions for 3-year terms each. Planning Board, 1 open position for a 5-year term. Library Trustees, 2 open positions, 3 years each. And the Municipal Light Board, 1 open position for 3 years each. So I think we need to probably do a motion on this. So I'm going to make a motion that we approve the information for the annual town caucus as presented by Michelle Johnson.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, well, can't do that. Roll call vote. Bill Johnson, yes.
Rosemary Meister, yes.
Okay, so that we'll have to go in and sign off on that so that can get posted. And the other thing that I have is that just came over today. We received a letter from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the Local Election Districts Review Commission, signed by William Francis Galvin, Secretary of State. Dear Select Board Chair, at a meeting held on November 5, 2021, the Local Election District Review Commission considered the submission redividing Ashburnham into 2 precincts. The commission is pleased to inform you that this division meets the requirements of Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 54, Section 6, and is otherwise consistent with law and thus has been approved by the commission. Please note that the effective date of your new precincts was December 31st, 2021. Thank you for your cooperation in this matter. Signed by Secretary Galvin and a couple other folks. So if you remember, we took a vote back a while back on this thing because of our population under the 2020 census. Ashburnham now has 2 voting precincts. So that has been approved by the Secretary of State's office. And that is it for me. Rosemary, reminders?
Yes, so we have a number of board vacancies. Economic Development has 5 vacancies. Parks and Recreation has 2 vacancies. Conservation Commission has 1 vacancy. Historical Commission, 4 vacancies. Cultural Council, 3 vacancies. Accessibility Committee, 2 vacancies. Affordable Housing Trust, 1 vacancy. Celebrate Ashburnham Street Fair, that's our brand new committee. We're looking for
6 people.
6 people for that. Our next select board meeting will be Monday, February 7th, 2022 at 6:30 p.m.
Okay. Anybody have anything else? Seeing nothing, thanks, everybody. I will make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
Bill Johnson, yes.
Rosemary Meissner, yes.
All right, folks, have a good night. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Have a good night.